We break into the top 5 on the Warchant.com top 40. Here we go. The 5 either most impactful players, best players, however you want to gauge this, the ones we anticipate have the greatest impact on the football field. Corey and Ira join me again as we go through this list. And it's interesting because, as has been the case with a lot of guys that we've talked about on this list or that made the top 40 in general, it doesn't take long for guys that are transfers from other schools, Power 5 schools in most cases, to instantly impact this roster dramatically. That tells you where Florida State's at, especially when one of those players comes in at number 5 from Kansas, and we think he's a top 5 player coming up for Florida State. They don't have a go-to experienced number 1 creme de la creme receiver. They have to hope that this is the guy, and Andrew Parchment. Ira, I'm going to let you go back-to-back. People don't remember that last video, but just so you know, this is back-to-back for you to start.
Well, first of all, I did want to point out that all 5 of these guys in the top 5 are transfers.
Yes, of course.
They didn't all just get here this year, but they all started their careers elsewhere. That speaks to where Florida State football has been the last couple of years. But yeah, Andrew Parchment was a big get for this staff, and they got him right after they got McKenzie Milton to jump on board last December. Andrew Parchment had 2 years ago had over 60 catches at Kansas, which again, you wouldn't expect Kansas to be, a team you're going to reach into for talented players. But he was the one guy, especially 2 years ago when they had that nice season under Les Miles, the first season. He had a really productive year. Last year he dropped down. I think he had an injury. They had really terrible quarterback play, terrible season. They went 0 on the season, and it was just kind of a disaster. But they bring him in. He's got one more year. He really was excited about the opportunity to play with McKenzie Milton. He's got here this summer. Real talented guy. I mean, they need him to be the number 1, number 2 guy with Ontario Wilson and Keyshawn Helton. And, if he can revert to that 2019 form, they may have something. Last year, obviously, was a major disappointment.
Well, Corey, before you go, I mean, this is a guy who's been very vocal about wanting to be an NFL wide receiver, a guy who wants to get drafted very high, who's in South Florida working out with current NFL players. I mean, he aspires to be that guy. He certainly sounds like an alpha.
I mean, yeah, you wonder why he ended up in Kansas, but he did well at Kansas in that 1 year that Ira was talking about. I think he had 4 or 5 100-yard games, and if you're wondering, nobody on the Florida State roster is loaded up with the 100-yard games in their resume. So what he did in 19 when he had 65 for 831 and missed a couple games or only had like 1 catch in a couple of those games, he was very, very productive for a bad football program. I think in a perfect world, Parchment would be transferring in as the number 2 wide receiver, but by omission, by nothing being here really that's proven, I think he does come in as your number 1 guy, and he could be a dude. Maybe he is an NFL guy. I'll be honest, I haven't seen enough. I've seen his highlights. I haven't seen enough of Kansas football to know how great he was in 2019. But I know he will add depth to this position, and it desperately needs playmaking and depth because there's little of both.
The one thing you do see on some of those highlights is him going up and getting the football, and they don't have enough of that. So that's a positive.
What about Parchment Funkadelic?
I like.
Is that a good nickname?
I like it. It's a bit of a reach, but it's tough to do something with Parchment. That's not bad, Corey. Keep at it though. We'll do more videos. We'll have opportunities.
I think Jeff's Pirates hat with the P for the P Funk got you inspired there.
Yeah, it might have. You're looking up at it. By the way, so we go in here at number 4, and we all love Jordan Travis. I think he comes in at number 4 for a lot of reasons, partly because obviously he's dynamic with the football in his hands. He's just a lot of fun to watch, and he's probably been the most exciting player Florida State's had in some time. But he has weaknesses in his game and also has a problem staying healthy, and we don't know what is his role because we know they got to utilize a guy like this who's a playmaker. But if we don't think he's going to win the starting quarterback job, are we sure that he buys into this other role? I would hope so, but we don't know. Jordan Travis obviously still competing to be the starting quarterback. They'll certainly use him there some, even if he's not the starter. But what do you think his role is, Corey? Where do you think how does this play out for him? Because we've got him in the top 5, and for that to happen, he's got to be a big part of this offense.
Well, you're like me and you're hedging your bets. Like I think I had Milton 1 and Travis 3 because one of them is going to start, and I am definitely not convinced that McKenzie Milton is 100% going to be the starter on this football team because I watched the spring. And he did not outplay Jordan Travis really in any way during the spring. The spring game, he was good, and you hope he keeps getting better. But there is a chance, not a small chance, that Jordan Travis is the starting quarterback. But if he's not, like you said, if McKenzie Milton's not the starting quarterback, he'll stand on the sideline with an iPad and a clipboard or whatever. He's not going to contribute. They will make a way for Jordan Travis to contribute a lot. I would think back, and this isn't a great memory to bring up for Florida State fans, but the Miami game and what they tried to do with the Miami game with Jordan Travis to start the game. He was on the field in like 4 different roles on the first 8 plays. He threw a pass. He ran a reverse. He was a running back. He was a wide receiver. I think he caught a pass. You could do stuff like that too, because you just don't have a ton of guys in the open field that make dudes miss and run past them like Jordan Travis does. So if he's not the quarterback, he'll still have an impact. But I will say that if he's not the quarterback, he is not going to be the 4th most important player on this team. I think that was a lot of us kind of hedging our bets, saying, well, one of these guys is going to be the starter, so we got to rank both of them high.
Yeah, and Ira, I'll let you go here, but I do think, Corey, to that point, I still think even if he's not your quarterback, he has to be a top 10 guy. They don't have playmakers. Florida State doesn't have playmakers. He's one. You just noted it. He makes plays with the ball in his hand. I don't think he's going to be the starting quarterback. I do believe McKenzie Milton's going to continue to get better. He spent most of the spring learning the offense and then really shined in the spring game. Threw on time, seemed to have an understanding, got him checked in the right protections, got rid of the ball when things weren't there. He looked like the guy that has played comfortably at quarterback at a high level. I think he's going to keep emerging. So they better figure out a way, in my opinion, to get Jordan Travis the ball in a huge capacity for this team. They just don't have enough guys that make people miss and then run away from guys once they do. Ira?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you. I mean, the reality is, I mean, I have McKenzie Milton 1 because I think at the end of the day, he's going to win the starting job. If I had Jordan Travis winning the starting job, McKenzie Milton wouldn't be on my top 40, to Corey's point. So it's you have to kind of make a decision. So, but it's also a little bit of hedging bets as well. But I think if McKenzie Milton wins the job, Jordan Travis can still be a huge part of this offense. The only question, though, is, how much, how durable can he be in that role, getting the ball out in space, getting the ball, those touches. It's one thing to run as a quarterback when you have the numbers advantage and you can kind of see everything before you even decide whether or not you're going to take off. If it's a design pass and, hey, we're throwing you the ball and that guy's going to tee off on you, or you're going to carry the ball and, into a defensive end who comes unblocked or whatever it is, that durability becomes a question. So, but I think he's going to be a big part of the offense. I think they're going to be in the backfield a lot together. And he's a dynamic player, man. If he can stay healthy, and he's another guy like Toafili, which we mentioned earlier, he's a guy that has put on some weight and maybe can be a little bit sturdier and withstand some of that punishment.
Not surprising. We have an offensive lineman in the top 3. He's a good one, too, and he's absolutely vital. Devontay Love-Taylor, we already know that. He should have a great year if healthy. Comes in at number 3. I don't know. I think it's self-explanatory. Florida State hasn't had a lot of consistent play on the offensive line, haven't had guys that they can really depend on. But when he plays, he's a difference maker. He's a good offensive lineman.
And better than we even expected. Like, he came in last year as a transfer who had played a lot. We thought he would be an upgrade for Florida State's offensive line based on what they had, because it was a really low bar. But I thought, Corey, I thought he was better than we even expected last year when he was healthy.
Yeah, I was kind of, be honest with you, I was expecting a Ryan Roberts type.
Right.
Just a guy, almost a body. No offense to Ryan Roberts, who might be president one day. He's a very, very intelligent man, and was a fine representative of Florida State, but he wasn't a great football player. This guy might not be a great football player, but he proved to be a pretty darn good one. And when you don't have many of those up front, they really stick out. And I thought, him coming back, what role is he going to be? Right? Is he going to be left? Do we know? It does matter, but the point is you need him on the line. He was calling out before he was doing some of the pre-snap stuff.
Yes, he was.
He was calling out the blocking assignments at tackle. You just can't overstate how valuable that experience, that leadership, that intelligence is on an offensive line.
Yeah, I think he played at least 3 spots last year, and he could play 3 or 4 this year. I mean, anything other than center, he's a guy that can play. That's why I don't think we think he's the 3rd best football player on this team. But because of all those reasons and his versatility, I think that's why he's the 3rd most important.
So the 2 guys that came in as hugely, we think, impactful players in transfers are, not surprisingly, 2 and 1 on our list. We'll start with Jermaine Johnson. Guys, obviously, when we got a chance to see Jermaine Johnson that first day of practice in the spring when he walked out. Ira, I think I was standing next to you as we were sitting up there at Hauser. He immediately looks like a player that would have started at Alabama, certainly obviously played at Georgia in the SEC, and he looked unlike any player physically that Florida State had. So right off the bat, you looked at him and said, that looks like a guy who could have played in 2013 for Florida State. Now, we'll see if he's that kind of productive. He's also extremely intelligent. He's got great work ethic. I had a chance to talk with him at length when I was doing the thing with Coach Norvell for the spring game. Really came away very impressed with who Jermaine Johnson is as a leader, his work ethic. Obviously, you're in awe when you look at him physically. He's got a chance to change the way Florida State plays defense. He's got a chance to save this secondary a lot of big plays as well if he can be productive off the edge and get to the quarterback. Either one of you can start in this one.
Corey.
Okay, I thought you had said Ira's name in there somewhere, so I was leaving it to Ira, but I'll be honest, I stopped listening about 9 seconds ago. But I will say this: how good must Georgia's defensive linemen be that this guy, they're like, all right, yeah, man, go somewhere else. Like, this guy to me looked like Brian Burns did in August. Like, the way Florida State could not block him reminded me of Brian Burns' the August before Brian Burns' last year. And it's like, okay, is that just a bad sign that Florida State can't block him? Or is this guy awesome? And with Burns, it was kind of a combination of both. I mean, it was a first-round pick. But this guy reminds me of that. And if he can have a similar type impact, now, obviously, that 18 defense was not great. But it was a lot better because Brian Burns, I can't even imagine what it would have been without Brian Burns. But he is a guy that they could not block him. They could not block him in the spring. And what I think stands out about it is that we know he can rush the passer. He's done that at an elite level at the SEC in limited snaps. As you can see, he played probably half the game at Georgia. He played, 30 snaps a game. But he was mainly used as a guy coming off the edge. Well, we saw it with our own eyes, and Norvell talked a lot about it. He ain't bad in the run either. Like, he did really well in the run, and that means he can be a 3-down lineman. Like, he can be on the field for every snap, which is very, very good for Florida State.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the combination of he's a really good football player, and they really were desperate for defensive ends. So it's like a win-win. You not only is it the win because you got a really good player, but it was at a position of huge need. They needed to go out and get a really big-time defensive end pass rusher, and they did that with Jermaine Johnson. And I think he's got a chance to be pretty special. Again, I think sometimes the one I worry a little bit that we overvalue him a little bit because of what we're comparing him to on the rest of that defense and how little pressure they got on the quarterback last year. But a big part of their problem last year, the quarterbacks like Bailey Hockman and the kid from Pitt and the kid from, all these quarterbacks had
all of them,
days.
Ira,
all of them had career days against Florida State because they didn't get any pass rush. The defensive ends combined for like 3 sacks last season. So he's a guy that can change that in a hurry. And as you said, that he's not a one-dimensional player. We've seen defensive ends who can't do anything else other than get upfield. He's a guy that seems to be pretty complete.
Yeah, thick body type. He's a horse. He can certainly play the run, and he gets after it, fast twitch off the edge, and we haven't had anybody like that in some time since Brian Burns, really. McKenzie Milton comes in at number 1. That shouldn't surprise anybody. It is interesting. Let's go back to what Corey said there in watching the spring practices. McKenzie Milton spent much of that time looking terrible. I mean, we're just going to be honest with you. If you were out there watching on a day-to-day basis, for Florida State fans, it was sort of a, maybe this isn't going to be what we thought it was going to be. And then all of a sudden, real late, he began to turn it on. That tells me he began to get more and more comfortable with what he was seeing and what they were asking him to do. And then the spring game happened, and obviously he played exceptionally well. I think he's only going to get better. He's only going to get better from here. When I was down on the sidelines listening to him interact with his teammates during the spring game, one of the things that I really liked is they all seemed to look to him for his leadership. He's got a very calm demeanor. Nothing seems to bother him in any way when he's talking with coaches, when he's talking with players. He seemed very, very comfortable, and I think he's going to take off. He has to for Florida State to have a chance to win 7 games or something along those lines. He's got to be good.
Well, don't you think the ceiling is with him? Like, meaning I didn't say that. That's not a phrase. The ceiling is with him is not something that's going to be on a T-shirt. That doesn't make
it might
any
be
sense.
now. It might be now.
Yeah. So, the ceiling is with him, yes. Sort of like the Force, Corey. Sort of like the Force.
Yeah. So if Florida State is going to reach its ceiling, whatever it is with this season in 2021, whether that's 8 wins or 6 wins or 9 wins or whatever, it will be because it would be McKenzie Milton reaching that level or getting close to that level that he was 3 years ago. That's why I ranked him number 1, even though I'm not convinced he's going to be the starting quarterback. The reason being, he would by far have the most impact on this team if he's the starting quarterback and playing well. We've seen what that ceiling looks like, and it's really high. Now, it doesn't raise this team's ceiling to championship level, but it raises it to competent, and it raises it to 7 or 8 wins and a bowl team. If you're getting, it's like the what if we did with on Warchant. Go read that if you haven't. But it's that's what it's like to me. It's like he could take a 5-win team and make it an 8-win team if he plays at the level he's played at before in his career.
Yeah, and to the point, Jeff was making at the beginning, when we saw him in the spring, the first few practices, the first couple of weeks actually, It was not impressive. And you sat there and he didn't look as comfortable. And it wasn't really, I was concerned about it until we had that one interview with him. I think it was like a week in, and he was talking, you could just see how frustrated he was. And because it was like watching somebody who was like trying to play football, like in a straitjacket or something. Like he couldn't do what he knows he can do because he didn't know the offense completely. He didn't, and all he talked about was, I got to get this offense down. I got to get the offense down. And so that's what that spring was about by the end of it. And we saw him in the spring game. He looked pretty darn good. Now with 4 or 5 months between then and the season, you can only imagine how much better he can get. So yeah, I'm excited about him. And the other thing is the other point Jeff made about his demeanor. If he's one of those guys, Florida State hasn't, not only have they not had good quarterback play, they haven't had great leadership at the quarterback position since Jameis left. And that's a big deal, man. So I think Jordan Travis can get the job done if he wins it, but I think McKenzie could be a little bit more special to your point.
Yeah, especially as a passer in obvious passing downs. That's the biggest problem Florida State has. I mean, Jordan Travis is electrifying. He can make plays when you're ahead of the chains or even, but if you're behind the chains and it's third and obvious, he's not a great thrower of the football yet. And McKenzie Milton's a guy that can make those throws and anticipatory throws into tight windows. And you got a chance to keep drives alive, guys.
Those are McKenzie's. Are those McKenzie's numbers? Yeah. They haven't seen that much green or blue at quarterback in a long time around here. I can tell you that much.
I can hear the shock in your voice. I
was like, that's a quarterback?
Yeah, that's a quarterback with blue and green. What is that? It's supposed to be orange and yellow and red. Look, man, that 17 season, now that was 4 years ago, but that he was incredible. In the 18 season, he was pretty darn good too. He also has the experience of winning big games for them, Central Florida big games. But hey, we can't mock anyone covering Florida State these days. But they were big games, and he had to. It wasn't like all those games were 51-6. Like he had to make plays in the fourth quarter when it mattered with his arm. All that experience, including against Auburn in a New Year's Six game. Like he just has that experience that you can't replicate. And he gets to throw to Parchment Funkadelic. And he's never gotten to do that before.
You really scared me where you were going there. When you finished Parchment and started the F part, I was like, oh my God, this whole video is ruined. We're done. What has he done to us?
I thought he just lost it. He's like, he's got to throw to a Kansas transfer.
Yeah,
here we go again.
He's just going to be angry all the time.
Yeah.
Well, that is your top 40 list, and there's number 1 in McKenzie Milton. No surprise there. We'll have plenty of time to talk about the upcoming football season here on Warchant.com as we get it geared up throughout the summer. Looking forward to it. Don't forget to hit the like button there below, like a million times. Just hit it over and over and over again. For Corey Clark and Ira Chaffel, our thanks to Aslan as well. You guys be well. We'll talk to you next time on Warchant.com.